Well, good evening and welcome to New Tracks Meetup. Really appreciate you coming tonight. We've got a really interesting program for you, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you're new to the show, I'd like to ask you to register at our website, newtracksmodeling.com. And when you get an email based on that registration, please answer the email to confirm the registration and to make sure that you get notices for all of our future meetings. I have some announcements that various people have asked me to make. Dan Darty, his O and S scale model Midwest show at the Wynham, Indianapolis is changed. The date is changed to this year, October 8th through the 10th of 2021. And you can get more details if you go to oscalemidwest.com website about the show, and you can get all of the new updated information about Dan's show. Again, it'll be October the 8th through the 10th in Indianapolis. Next, I'd like to talk about the PCR 2021 convention that starts April the 24th on Zoom. This is going to be a smaller version of what the 2021 National NMRA Convention will be like. So if you're interested in attending and you want to see what a preview of it is going to be, then I really hope that you can make the PCR 2021 convention on April the 24th. And if you go to the website, PCR 2021 convention, then you can register and get all of the current information about what they're going to be doing. Al Collins of Ultimation called me. Al is offering a special 10% discount on all of his equipment from Friday, yesterday, through the 19th, through Monday. So tonight, Sunday, and Monday, Al is offering a 10% discount. To get the discount, you need to go to his ultimation.ca website and type in all caps, WGH. And what that stands for is the world's greatest hobby show, because this is the reason that Al is offering this discount. I think he's going to be a person appearing on the show, as I understand it, with Rick Hunter and Marine, who is also one of the vendors at the show. So again, it's Al Collins and the WGH in all caps. If you'll type that in his website, then you'll get a 10% discount on his equipment through Monday, the 19th. And so I wish Al the best with that, and I think that's wonderful. I'd also like to say something about Dan Cohen. Dan has a YouTube channel. It's called HOSWITCHING Switching Module, MODULE, HO Switching Module. Dan is building 2 modules for his switching layout, and he's working on the NMRA's achievement program. And he'll be showing the models that he's building, the issues that he's having, and how he's accomplishing it on his channel. And I hope that if you get a chance, you can take a look at Dan's channel and follow along with him. Now I'd like to talk about the build along projects. I think these are really interesting. I think they're really important. I want to thank again Clark Kooning, MMR, and the people from Downtown Deco for what they did. I think Clark did a beautiful model. I think he showed how to build in that medium, how to paint in that medium, and I think that was extremely beneficial. And I really do thank Clark for doing that. Next show on the 21st of April, we're going to do a special My Bill section just for the modelers that built along with Clark doing the Downtown Deco kit. And I really hope that a lot of you come out According to what Clark found out from the manufacturer, he was pleased with the results. He would do it again, which is good news. I'm happy about that. But Clark spent a lot of time and effort putting the presentation together, and we know some kits were sold. So if you bought a kit, if you built a kit, if you're in the process of building the kit, I hope you'll come and show us what you're working on for that downtown deco build along with Clark. And that'll be in the next show on the 24th, 21st of April. Tonight, we've got Bob Farquhar building one of Dale Rush's Blair line kits. And this is the first of the build-alongs for this kit that Bob has done. And Bob, thank you so very much for doing it. I really do appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the start of it this evening. Then we've got Gaylord Gill and Randy Bosder building the one kit from Bar Mills. Again, this is really different because this is about as close to scratch building as you're going to get without actually building from scratch. And Gaylord, Randy, I can't thank you enough for doing this. This is an unusual kind of modeling, and I think it's going to be extremely interesting and beneficial to a lot of people. Then this fall, we have what I've been calling the super build along, where we've got 4 modelers that are going to build exactly the same kit, and we've selected a manufacturer. Now, I'll talk about this later on in the show, but I really think this is going to be something really special. And I hope that we get an awful lot of people participating with that build along. We're also got on the schedule for this fall, Bill Davis, who's going to build one of Steve Milley's rail scale models. And I think that's going to be really interesting because Steve produces an awful lot of beautiful kits, and the one that he selected for this, I think you're going to really enjoy. Martin Breckbilt, MMR, is going to be building a Leadville Designs kit. And Banta Models is going to be doing a kit of theirs with a modeler yet to be selected. I need either an HO or an O-scale modeler. It makes no difference to me. If you'd like to build the Banta kit on a build along, please let me know. So that takes care of the build along. The My Build. The next My Build is this coming show, 21st of April. And as I said, this is only for Clark Koenig's MMR's build along modelers. But this will be one of the main events for the April 21st show. The May 29th show is going to be a My Build that Chris Kos runs that's open to everyone. So anybody can come, anybody can show us the model. I encourage you to send Chris an email to make sure that you can get a time for the show. We want to try to limit the amount of time each person has so we can get as many people as possible. So I'm suggesting no more than 5 minutes per person for that show. Also at that show on the 29th, the modelers who have built along with Bob Farquhar and Blair Line, we're going to have a special segment just for them. And then we're going to have another special segment on the 29th for those modelers who have built along with Gaylord and Randy, the Bar Mills One kit. So that's going to be a tremendous opportunity to see an awful lot of different models and find out from the people what issues they may have had or ideas they may have had to improve it, and what they may have done to kit bash the models that they built along with. Also, we have Bar Mills for the modelers that build along with Gaylord and Randy. Bar Mills is given a $25 credit to modelers who come the 29th of May and show their model that they built from the one kit. So if for no other reason than to pick up a $25 credit off your next Bar Mills kit is reason enough, in my opinion, for you to come and participate in that My Bill on the 29th of May. So with those announcements, I will shut up and turn this over to Paul Thompson for his quick tip of the evening. Paul?
Great, thank you, Jim. And just let me start the share screen here. Okay. Um, is that one up?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
What I've got here, can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's a small little lamp, correct?
Yep, good. Okay. What I thought I'd talk about tonight or mention tonight is the fact that when I'm doing all these presentations, et cetera, and when I'm doing some work, the one thing that we should really be taking a note of is lighting. And what I've got here is I've got a nifty little lamp that I basically show most of my stuff with and taking photographs. As you can see, when it turns, it's quite bright. It tilts, it does whatever. And what I'd like to say is this is an aught light, and basically I got this, I think, for under $20 on sale somewhere. And places like Michael's have great lamps on sale once a year, craft shops, this type of thing. And it's one of the sort of the overlooked things. The other thing we've got is today's source of LED lights, et cetera, for flashlights. Absolutely stunning stuff. And you never know when you have a dark spot in your layout or your module or you're at a show and you need to light it up. It's handy to have, and these things last forever. I think I've had this thing about 2 or 3 years and I put batteries in it once. The other thing too is and pardon the mess because this is one of my clutter things when I get working on something, but the other thing is this has got an LED ring with a magnifier, and it's handy because I use it as both a light and then I can magnify things when I need to. So this is the light showing what you can do to sort of highlight. And basically, if you're looking for something that's black, you can light it up real nice. That was just a photograph taken with no flash, nothing. My whole point here is look for a good light that you can use. It's always handy. You never really need to pay full price for the thing if you look out for sales. The magnifying glass, I think I got at a hi-fi shop when I was walking through there. They had a whole of them on, and it was something like $29. An absolute bargain. So, I mean, these things don't have to be expensive, but they are, in my opinion, a necessity, particularly as you grow older. And that's my tip for the night, guys. Thank you.
Well, Paul, thank you so very much. I appreciate it. It's good. That's good advice. I use that lighting all the time. I can't see without it. Now I'd like to turn to Andy Kim for his Ops Center. Andy, welcome, and thank you so much for doing this for us.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Let me get my, let's see, share screen. Okay, we're going to go over traffic control on the railroad. We're not going to go in depth, but we're going to cover some of the more basic stuff, the things that either were very popular or they are popular today. And just give you an overview. At a later date, we can dive into these a little bit deeper one at a time. So first of all is railroad, do you see the thing up just above railroad traffic control? Is that showing up there?
Yes.
How do I get rid of that? I don't normally have that.
Well, it's not showing up on mine.
Oh, it's not? Okay. Well, it's the bar that's usually at the bottom. For some reason, it's sitting up at the top.
Well, good news is it's not being shown on YouTube. So
Okay. All right, good. What we're going to talk about are the various ways of controlling traffic through the years here. So let me just start through. The basics are timetable train orders, which are pretty much done. There might be a few of those on some of the smaller railroads, branch lines. You only have 1 or 2 trains and such. CTC, centralized traffic control, which is basically what they have today, just about all over. And along with that, they have TWC, traffic warrant control, or direct traffic control. Direct traffic control you don't see as much. They're more out west, I understand. So timetable train orders, or TTTO. Some people love them and some people hate them, but the operators that really get into operation, they find timetable and train orders very interesting, challenging, and a lot of fun. And it's a good way to have your cornfield meets and that if you're not paying attention. So the timetable is an employee timetable. The real railroads had these and they update them on a regular basis. This one is Mike Dodd's Virginian and is Virginian Railway. He created this timetable for his railroad operations. And on the inside of that timetable, it gives you it's a little blocked here by the thing I've got up the top, but it gives you the information on the stations, on the routes, the westward and eastward, if you're following my cursor, and then the trains that are on a schedule. So timetable is only used for a scheduled train, of course. The other trains are not scheduled, are called extras. And that's where the train orders come in. So let's take train number 77. We can see up the top, this goes Danville to Pepper. So over 3 sub-districts, Danville's at the top and Pepper, well, Pepper's right here. But you can see the train continues all the way through. So it leaves Danville at 6:32. And one thing I should point out, westward, you read down. Eastward, you read up. And then you would do the same for northward and southward. One will read down and one will read up. So the train leaves Danville at 6:39, or that's when they can leave Danville at 6:39. And Radford, it arrives at 6:52, or it cannot leave there before 6:52. So these times are the times they can leave, but they cannot leave before that time. And if they're running late, then they just leave as soon as they're ready. And you can see that's all the way down through here. And then train 78 is just the opposite. Starts down here at Hinton and it leaves at 6:31. And you can see the time all the way till it gets up here at Danville. So the next one is first class passenger train. You've got classes. You got first class all the way through. You can have a 5th class if the railroad wants, or if you want. Depends how you break your trains down. So in this schedule, I have southwards. I've only got 1 class train on the southward. Northward, I have 4 trains. And you can see the first class number 5. Again, you read down, and it leaves Bowling Green at 1:25 p.m. and you can see the times that it departs each of the stations, or it cannot depart before those times until it arrives at Nashville Union Passenger Station. And this time is set up for on my railroad, so you'll see the time isn't as long as it would be for real railroad. Also, next to the that gives you the miles from Indianapolis. So these are mile posts. So across the railroad, you have these mile posts. And then siding capacity, there's double track. And then it gives siding capacity for the sidings. And then back to double track. And this is just half the railroad. The other half's on the other side. The symbols, the O is for operator and R is a register station. And I can cover the register station in a little bit here. So the station ID, just a 2-letter identifier, and then the station and the distance between each of these stations all the way down. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to jump in and ask as we're talking about it, however you would like to work it.
Andy, let me ask you a question.
Yes,
You've
sir.
got you've got the distances between the two, between the stations.
Yes, right here.
Is there a time connected with that? I mean, do you run it by time clock or?
Well, what it is, the distance is now I've got mine down to 12 feet to the mile. It's miles, scale miles. And from that, I've got a distance, and that gives me I set the, how do I want to put it? I take a speed that I want the train to travel at, and it should be able to go across the railroad, hitting each of these locations on time based on the speed for this distance. So say 50-mile-an-hour passenger train goes across the railroad. So I would set these times up so he doesn't have to stop at each station and wait till the time comes up. Does that make sense?
Yes, I that's what I wondered how you did it.
Right, yeah. And some of these stations have stops, for the passenger train, depending on the passenger train, if it's a local or, one of the first class overnighters, they're just going to stop at a couple of locations.
Right.
So, okay.
Hey,
All
Andy,
right.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
With when did they start using train orders?
Train orders were one of the initial ways, or I should say, it is the initial way that trains controlled or railroads control their trains across the railroad. And one of the big problems, and this would be back in the 1800s, one of the big problems was, and I'm not sure if we discussed it or not. I think we did. There was no time zones. So every town had its own 12 o'clock. So, and that's when the sun hit 12 o'clock high. And that was a real bugger for railroads because they worked off the clock, and the clock was different at every town. And that could cause some problems, cause head-on collisions and other problems. So the government created the time zones for the railroads, and they were able to operate within a zone, the Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific, on one clock time, which makes sense. Is going to be a lot safer. So, but I can't. I mean, I could look it up, but I can't give you right offhand when the train orders started. But they were very, very early. I would say they preceded the Civil War. Okay.
So what did they used to use before train orders?
Well, that's what I'm not sure of. I think it would probably some kind of combination of written orders. But maybe back then you only had a train going in each direction, one train going in each direction on some of these early railroads. And maybe the eastbound train didn't depart until the westbound arrived. I'm just not sure. I'm no expert when it comes to the really early days.
All right, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. And they did use telegraph to get all these orders back and forth between stations. It was way before the telephone.
If I may.
Yes.
Originally, there was no such thing as train orders. There was just the published schedule, and train got where it got. And at some point after the telegraph, I forget the exact railroad, but there was a person that a superintendent, he waited and waited and waited, and so he telegraphed the next station and said, "Is the train there?" They said no. He said, "Hold it till I get there." And he did this for like 5 or 6 stations. The train was several hours late, and they had no way to tell anybody else because they weren't using officially the telegraph. And that got implemented probably pretty quickly. And then the time thing you talked about, president's conference on time wasn't about the US president, but all the railroad presidents that were fed up with it. And they're the ones that made the proposal. And it was, before it was government, it was just the railroads that followed it. And the railroad time and the town time might be, well, probably an hour apart some places, because, you know, the time zones are a lot bigger than the sun arc as far as when it's high noon. But eventually the government said, no, we're all going to do this.
Yeah. Well, that makes
but I
sense.
think that wasn't until after the Civil War.
Okay. Okay.
I think.
Yeah, and I'd just be guessing, TC. I just don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm going off of memory from articles I've read. So I'm definitely not the horse's mouth.
Yeah, I hear you. I've been sometimes called the opposite end of that, but I
Yeah.
try my best. Okay, train orders. Train orders are for the extra trains that aren't on the schedule. And this again is Mike Dodd's Virginian, just basic desk with a speaker, and he can use, I'm not sure if they're radios. I think he has telephones around the layout. So he would write train orders for his for the trains, the crews, and give them the information on what they needed to get their train across the railroad. So here you see a register, the dispatcher's, the dispatcher's train sheet, and this is where he keeps up with all the trains and where they're at across the railroad. Okay, this is my dispatcher's desk, and this sheet you can see is a fairly good size one. And we've actually, this is just half the railroad. Got another sheet the same size for the south half the railroad, and this would be the opposite, either north or it would be the other sheet anyways. And so each of these columns is a train, or would be a train. So he puts the information of the train at the top portion, and then these are all the towns like I showed you on the timetable. And he would mark the train starts here and it ends here. And as it goes by each of these stations, the station operator, and since we don't have a station operator every station, it's the crew would act as the station operator as they go by. They would call the dispatcher on the telephone, and he would talk to them, and they would give him the information on their train passing and the time, and he would write it down on this. So let me go a little further. Okay, now this is a station operator. Dispatcher sits wherever he's located, and he has telephones out to all the station operators across the railroad that he works with. And this station operator is the dispatcher's dictating the train order to him. That's the yellow sheet. And then this is a clearance form, a clearance card they sometimes call it. It's clearance A. And I'll show you a close-up of that after. But the clearance card, every train that goes on the dispatcher's tracks has to have a clearance, whether they're an extra train or a scheduled train. And again, we're talking about timetable train orders now, not necessarily today's railroad. So the station operator would fill these forms out based on what the dispatcher tells them. He'd verify it was correct with the dispatcher. And then this is what they would hoop up to the train as the train goes by, or hoop it up to the crew. And that would give them their orders and tell them exactly what they have to do, how far they can go clearance wise. So here's the clearance Form A. And basically it's to the conductor and engineer, extra 7055 north. And they're talking just to the locomotive here, the locomotive crew. It's not a train yet, and the train's at Gresham. and they sign the time and the dispatcher's and the operator's initials. And then you go to the actual train order. It's a train order number 21. So every order dispatcher puts out, there's a number here, and it'll go 21 through 30, 35, however many he writes. This is a Form 19, which is a standard form that they use most of the time. And this is to C&E engine 7055, or it would be 7-055, railroad parlance. They didn't say zero, they said not, at Gresham. Engine 7055 run extra Gresham to Bowling Green, and that makes it a train, and he's cleared to Bowling Green from Gresham. So that will get him to his terminal, but he has to watch along the way. Every station he goes by has train orders or train order signal. He could get a red signal or a board and stop and get updated information orders. So that's how you get the trains across the railroad with timetable train orders. Any question?
Yes, I'm assuming this is also for maintenance of way equipment, like
No.
ferry rail service or something like that.
Yes, anything on the dispatcher's track, the control track, they have to have clearance to get on it, and they have to have their orders to tell them what they can, they can do. So and again, we're talking back in the day. What they would do is, if you had maintenance people that are going to be working in a certain area, maybe several miles between two towns, the dispatcher might give them that track and for so much time. So he will not allow another train to go through there and possibly create a conflict between the trains, or worse. And when they're cleared from that, then the dispatcher would open it back up for the other trains. So there's all different ways these orders can be written. Form 19 is the standard, but there's all kinds of different form numbers. I can't come up with them right now, but it's basically, it's the same form that you're using, that yellow pad. But the information and the way you put it on there in the order is what changes the form number. And that, being a military background and also a government background, I had a lot of trouble, because a form to me was a specific piece of paper with specific information on it. And if you got a form of a different number, you went and found a different piece of paper that was formed up in a different way. So it took me a while to understand exactly what they talked about on the railroad, on the rule book, when they're talking about forms for the train orders. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Does the train order tell what kind of train it is, or a rough, existence of, what's put together?
No, the train order only allows the train to get on the dispatcher's track and go where the dispatcher told me to go. He's going to know more about that train, more than likely. But as far as the order goes, it's just telling the crew what they can do.
Okay.
All right, now we're getting
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're getting into CTC. This is a little blurry, this picture, but this is Lee Nichols. He's got a fantastic railroad. Some of you are probably a lot more aware of it than I am. I've just seen it in video and in magazines. But this is a really nice CTC panel, a real one that Lee has that he operates his railroad with. In CTC, centralized traffic control, the dispatcher controls all the signals and all the switches in that. So he gets a train across the railroad by giving them the clearances through the signals. And he can put one in the siding to pass another one and such. So it makes it a lot easier for the crew. The crew gets on their train and they just go. And when the signal is green or yellow, or a specific type of signal allows them to proceed, then they just do that, and they can go right across the railroad using that. They might be put in the siding, and my dog is playing with me here. Okay, stay down. They might be put in the siding for a couple of hours for one reason or another, but that will that will get them across the railroad. So, and here's a gentleman using Lee's CTC panel during an op. And you can see he's got the form there. He still keeps track of the trains going across the railroad. It's not as important as it is for a dispatcher and dark territory using. Dark territory is no signals. That's where you're operating strictly on timetable train orders. When I say dark territory could be ABS signals. If I'm incorrect, someone correct me. But ABS, it just lets you know the track ahead of you is clear, but it's not a clearance like CTC. It doesn't mean you're cleared to go down that track unless you've got orders telling you you're clear to go down that track. But the signals there would tell you that the track ahead of you is clear. If it's red, then you don't want to proceed. You'd want to sit there. There's probably something coming at you.
Andy, what does ABS stand for?
Oh, I'm sorry. Absolute block signals.
Thank you.
And what that means, the railroad's broken up. Oh, my dog just found something noisy. I might have to grab it from.
Automatic block signals.
Okay, what did I say?
Absolute. It's automatic.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Let me get this with my dog. Okay. Yes, automatic block signals, and the railroad is broken up into blocks, and those signals let you know what's ahead of you. Depending on the signal you get, the next 3 blocks might be clear, or you're clear in the next block, but the block after you won't be able to go into because there's traffic in there. I'm not really up on ABS, and I really don't have a desire to use ABS on my railroad. I'm going to go with a CTC across the double track main in the city. So it'll be CTC and pure dark territory with no signals. Any questions?
Yeah, I do. Again, with the signals. So if you're going with the CTC, do you get a warning signal and a block prior, or do you have to see the signal and then get the train stopped? How does that work?
Well, they've got intermediate signals, and they've got right here is a control point. So you'd have further back behind us would have been an intermediate signal. It would be telling you what to expect when you get up here. So it's kind of like does the same thing as a block, but it's working around all these control points. So anywhere there's a switch or an area where they want to control the train from one track to another and such, they would use the approach, the intermediate signals, the approach signals, and the home signal. Whether there's always those 3 for all these control points, I'm not quite sure, but they would indicate to you what to expect. So you would be slowing the train and you would be ready to stop it if it had to be stopped. So it's not like you're like in an automobile, all of a sudden you got a yellow and you think it's going to go red and you got to hit the brakes really fast. So the control point here, the dispatcher controls the signals, and he also controls the switch. So if they're going to put you in that siding where you see those cars down there, you would know with the signal back behind you that you're going to be placed on that siding. And the signals will give you all those indications, and then the switch would be lined for the siding. Okay, interlocking. Interlocking is kind of like a small CTC area if you want. It doesn't work exactly the same way, but we'll show you a couple of pictures here, might make a little more sense. But interlocking signal permits movement within the limits of the interlocking plant, and we can talk about that a little bit more in one of the pictures. As the name implies, interlocking are arrangements of signals. They're designed so there's no conflict in the area that they want to get you through. So they can move you through the interlocking. They have the switches all set. They have the signals all set, and you shouldn't have any problems going through there if all that works correctly. Interlocking may be manual or automatic, and today it's a lot more automatic, but manual, you've seen all those big Armstrong switches up in the towers that the switch operator has to, or tower operator has to line the switches with, and you see all the rods that go out to the switches. I'm not sure if I have a picture of that or not, which I probably should have added one. So automatic interlockings are most common at remote areas. So those are areas of crossings of two different railroads and such. So here's an interlocking. Just to show you all from this point right here to somewhere over in this point, exactly where, I'm not sure, but they control all the switches and the signals through here. And they will take a train, if a train has to go on track number 2 here on the left side, and they bring them up here to track number 2, then they'll line the switches and the signals to get that train to that point. So just because you've got the signal and the switches, if you've not been given clearance to get through that interlocking, because you'll have these back with the old train orders and timetable type stuff. It would be the train orders. If your order doesn't give you clearance to go through Hicksville, then just because you come up here at your clearance limit and they line everything up for you, you don't proceed until you've got a clearance to do so. And in other words, another train order. I hope that makes sense. In other words, these signals don't give you the right to go through. They're just letting you know everything's lined up so you can go through. Okay, this one here, now I was looking at this. I think this locomotive is photoshopped. And the reason I'm seeing that, all these signals are red. This one's green. This switch is lined up to come this way. And that back there is green and that's green. So this track is all lined up for a train to come from here all the way through there. And I just don't see where that locomotive fits there with that indication. However, this is Chicago, the main station downtown. And this is the switch tower. And they control all the blocks, or I should say all the switches through here and all the signals. And you can see there's more further back behind the camera. So that would be an interlocking. Okay, here's another one, switch tower, interlocking tower. And you see this is a little more simple. They probably control this switch here, and it looks like there's one down there for this siding. So they control all that. The other thing, you don't see it here, so I don't think this is a tower operator with, you know, for train orders and such, but you could see one of them could have it. There's no signal here for it, but if you had a order board, train order board, or a signal, lighted signal, he could take the train orders and hoop them up to the trains coming through here if this was their clearance limit, or if they had new orders for the crew. Okay, track warrant. Track warrant is something, and this again, this is Joe Fugit's Siskiyou line. Track warrant is being used a lot more now, and basically via radio, the dispatcher will talk directly to the train crew and will tell them what to check, what boxes to check, and what to put in each of these areas. So when the crew gets through filling that out, they'll repeat it back to the dispatcher, and if it's all correct, he'll tell them it's correct, and they'll sign off on it. And then those are his orders to get to wherever his clearance limit is. And it's a lot like the train orders of old, but it's a lot quicker and cleaner. And it's just dispatcher direct to the train. Okay, track warrant control authorizes dispatcher to verbally instruct the train to proceed, usually via radio. Dispatcher selects the stations or mileposts between which the train may move. And train crew writes the instructions on a track warrant. Now, direct traffic control, you don't see as many railroads using it now, I understand. It's used more out in the West. CNO or CSX did use it. Whether they're still using it, I'm not sure from what I was reading a little while ago. But direct traffic control is similar in execution to the traffic warrant control, but they have the railroad broken into blocks. So maybe from town A to town B would be one block, and then town C's 3 blocks. Keeping it simple, you could use anything. Junctions or whatever, a milepost. And the dispatcher gives them authority for each block. So they say it's a little more cumbersome. You can't be so specific on what he gives them, but it's something that they can do, and it's fairly quick, especially if you figure out west where you've got a lot of just open desert area, no towns to speak of. That would work pretty good for some of those railroads if they're not CTC. So yard limits. Okay, yard limits, a lot of people misunderstand yard limits. Yard limits are only in effect for mainline dispatchers track. We're not talking about a yard. And we're not talking about sidings and that, industrial sidings, that kind of thing. So a yard limit can be placed on the main line in certain areas. And when it is, then the train has to travel at a speed which it can stop in time for any kind of conflict that might come up. They've used the term half the distance, half the distance that you can see. You have to be able to stop within that. So as you can see, trains would be fairly slow also using this. But the yard limits, say you have a town with a yard and the main line goes right through the yard or by the yard where some of the local traffic has to go back and forth across the main. If it's yard limits, then they can just go back and forth with no problem, crossing the main, using a piece of the main within the yard limits. If the yard limits, let's see, how do I want to put this? If the only time the yard limit is a mainline track where you have to be off of it, is if you have a first class train, like a passenger train going through first class, then you have to be clear of it. Any other time you can use it, and any other class train has to be ready to stop for you. So again, the yard limits only affects mainline track, dispatchers control track. And one of the things that I'm using yard limits for is the main line between the 2 major yards on my railroad, one in the north end of town, one south end of town. And it's yard limits between those 2. And that way the transfers and the other trains can just run back and forth without having to go through the train orders and all. Later, when we get CTC, then we'll use CTC to control those trains. So yard limits authorize any train to move at speed that allows it to avoid conflict. This is a railroad equivalent to aviation's VFR, visual flight rule. Yardmaster may direct the yard movement, but does not provide movement authority on through the yard limits. Trains and engines must still watch out for each other. And yard limits can apply beyond the yard, such as on branch lines where speeds are slow and train meets are rare. So I've got one branch line that we're going to make the whole thing yard limits, and that way he doesn't have to have orders written. And he just operates at a speed that he can stop within assured clear distance if he sees another train. And normally it'd just be one train on that branch line. Okay, and that's it. That's the end. Again, I didn't try to cover everything in depth because I'm no expert on a lot of this stuff. From a modeling point of view, I feel I have a fairly good understanding of it, so I can run my railroad in a realistic operation and not tie the crews down so much that they're afraid to operate. So we keep it kind of light. If any of you have any thoughts on anything I said that's incorrect, please correct me. Yeah, I don't want people walking away with the wrong idea. So, anybody?
I think you're good to go, Andy.
Okay, Jim. Well, I hope I didn't confuse everybody.
Not at all. I think it's interesting, very, very interesting for me. And I'm
Okay.
sure for a lot of us, a lot of us hear about operation, but a lot of us don't really, abide by operation.
Right.
We just run our trains. And that's why I'm so happy that you agreed to do this, because you're bringing a perspective to the show that I think is really important. So thank you so very much.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Now I'd like to move to Bob Farquhar. Bob is building a Dale Rush kit for Blair Line. And I want to thank Dale so much for his cooperation and his participation with the kit building. And I want to thank Bob Farquhar for agreeing to do the build along. I think that these are really important, and I really do appreciate the time and effort that both Blair Line and Bob have put into this. Blair Line gave a very, very good discount and super pricing on the kit. And I really do appreciate everything that Dale has done. So Bob, I will turn it over to you, sir.
Okay. If anybody has any questions during my presentations, please speak up, because I'd rather do it during the presentation rather than afterwards. So we'll start there. And there we go. So this is the Blair Line kit. I'm doing the HO scale version of this one. This is the kit box as it comes. I've showed this only because that's the only picture you see with the shed on the back of it. So you get an idea for that one. When you're looking at this picture of this kit, you can see the base is pretty much a concrete slab. I'm going to be painting in a concrete color. Board and batten siding inside and the other side. Scribe siding for the front and the back wall and the shed as well. And of course, you have these posts and that here. A lot of signage. His is called a general store, even though his sign here shows as groceries. He has all kinds of different signs. I'll show them later. It looks like rolled tar paper roofing, and looks like a tin cap on there, simulated tin cap, and a chimney. And this kit is laser cut, and it's all tabbed and slot, and that's quite nice. Goes together really nicely. Mostly general stores and grocery stores like this are fairly well maintained. So the little bit of weathering in here, they won't be really run down. Now, if you want to have it like a dilapidated abandoned building or whatever, Greg Cassidy has done a real excellent job of this kit in HO scale, and really impressive. But I'm going to be building this as it's shown in here. And as I say, it's a HO scale. So what I did, I just spent a bunch of time here and just got took 1 minute, put some markers out here, just different colors. And it seems that I had nicer colors I want to do than just plain white. And I'm going to do white because I find that it's the, I don't know, it just seemed to be the neater of the whole bunch. So this is what the kit is composed of. So these trim pieces here, the thicker one, there's 2 strip pieces here. Well, the thicker one is the support inside the building. That's where the walls will attach to. And the thinner one is the porch support. And this is the base. That's where we're going to be. Where's that? Hang on. There it is. Sorry. This base here, this is the front of the building right here. It goes into these slots here. There's the little holes for the porch roof supports. And this is the rear wall. And this is for the shed going back in through here. And of course, the three shed walls here, the side walls, the end wall, and the rear wall of the main building, the front wall. Now there's two parts of the front wall. There's a finished wall, and this one goes inside this one. And you'll notice this window opening here is bigger than this one here. Now, the idea is when you put the window glass, when you cut out the glass, it's all marked up for you here. And these part numbers refer to the instructions. And when you cut these out, they fit up in here perfectly, and for your window. Same idea for the door. That you have to cut that out, by the way. This is the roofing. There's a main roof in there, and you can see the tabs in here for the fit into these tabs up here. The slots here for the tabs up here. They're in the front and the rear. And this is for the chimney. There's the window for the shed, and this is the board and batten siding, the front porch roof and the rear shed roof, and that's the port pieces for the front porch roof. A lot of different signs. You can see the general store sign and company store sign and a grocery store sign. You got lots of signs. And one wet decal, and then. This is an advice to keep this piece here together. Do not separate the windows and doors because you'll paint it in that fret and makes it easier. Then you can just touch up when you pull them out later, you can touch up the sides. So starting with the base, this is the part for cutout. If you want to do lighting interior or something like that, you can cut this out. I'm leaving it intact. Then it's been really well engineered in the sense that a lot of laser kit manufacturers have a lot of join pieces like all the way along the side here, and it's a bugger to get them out. This one here, this kit has been designed, only 4 of them there. There's one here, that little left over just to cut through there. And when you do that, this is what you're left with. And this piece here is basically a scrap piece, but I would keep it aside, and the main reason is maybe use that piece for a sidewall bracing later on during the build. And there's what all the pieces are going to be left over when you finished out cutting out all the pieces. So this is good for scratch building in something in the future, or you need a piece of wood for whatever reason. A good idea to save all these pieces. And there's the little, when you cut these little tabs off there, or they'll joiner pieces, it just sand them through smooth afterwards. So the first step now there's 2 options here. I'm going to show how to do a painted one and also a stained one. I'm going to do the rear shed as a stain and paint everything else. So what you do is use a gray primer paint, because if you're going to be using a white. If you're going to use a darker color, use the rust color type of primer. Actually, either one would work anyway, doesn't matter. Do both sides. The main reason is because most of the paint now is water-based, and if you do one side only, it will warp. So you do both sides, and I suggest in one spraying thing, you can do the backs, then flip it over and paint the front, and then let them dry. So make sure you do both sides. So this is for the staining. I showed this before several weeks ago. This is a little small cup, about 1/4 inch, with alcohol in here, and I put in the India ink. And make sure it's non-waterproof, because a lot of India inks are waterproof inks. So make sure it's non-waterproof ink, otherwise it doesn't mix well. Or you can use a shoe dye, either way. What I've been using is this Hunterline weathering mix, the driftwood color, and I find that's a lot easier. Now this is, as an example, with 3 drops, eye drops eyedropper. 3 drops of ink, that's color, that's a color there. And there's for 6. That's probably one they want. There's 9, is a little bit dark unless you want dark. And this is for the shoe dye, same idea. You may want to do maybe a 4. 3 is quite light, 6 a bit heavy, dark, maybe 4 or 5 you want to do. And what you could do then is test it on a piece of the scrap that you have left over after you cut out the pieces. So for the staining now, when the laser cut this wood, burns the wood, and it actually seals the wood per se. Now, if you're going to paint it, it's not a problem. You can just leave it the way it is. But if you're going to stain it, the stain will not go into the side area with the burns edges. You have to sand them down. So this is an example. Do both sides of this with a brush, and now you put it into under 2 pieces of wax paper, and then I put weights on top of it and leave it overnight, and it will not warp. And even if the next day you'd be fine, just take the weight off and you're good. And now in this example, this edge here is not standing down because it's going to be the bottom of the wall. There's the top of the wall going to be hidden by the roof, and actually the sides here and these sides here are going to be hidden by trim pieces that are going to be put in through here. You might want to touch up the window here opening. And if you want to have the rear door open a bit, you want to sign the door edges here too. Now, the strip wood, excuse the I don't have a very good photographer. Okay, it's me. Anyway, a piece of paper, sandpaper in half, and then it's to sand out these strip wood pieces, the 2 of them. And if you want to go with dilapidated type of building or rundown building, you want to be texture up the wood here first, which is like a razor saw or brass bristle brush, and then sand it down. Because there's, even when it comes from the manufacturer, there's little pieces of or little hairs hanging out here, or little piece of wood. Anyway, you can sand it down, make it smooth again. Now I painted this white. This is the thicker one you're going to be using for the internal wall, or the holding the walls straight, and it's inside the building, so you don't see them anyway. I don't know why I did that, but I did. And this one's going to be cutting it out to the porch walls. So that's it for today. And this is the first of the 5 sessions of doing this build, and the next one is going to be doing the paint. So I'm done. Any questions?
I do. On the if you're doing the ink and alcohol, what's recommended as far as mixing the ink and alcohol, like amounts?
Yeah, I generally go start with 2 rum and cokes. I know in the States you can't, I don't think you can get above 75% alcohol. In Canada, we get 99% or 90%. Well, that's what I use in Canada. But it doesn't really matter anyway. And I just drop it in, and with the alcohol, this paints this mixes it perfectly. You don't have to stir it, don't have to do anything. Just drop it in. If you don't have an eyedropper, I use a stick, whenever, dip it into the ink and just drop into the ink alcohol. Yep.
Bob, why do you use stain instead of paint as your base?
Generally, 99% of the time, I'm using a building that isn't as nicely finished as this one is. Like this one will be. This is generally my buildings are running down a bit, or they haven't been maintained well over the years, so it's easier to get the alcohol in the ink coloring to come through the paint later on when you're doing the weathering and stuff. Because when I do my weathering on that, I scrape off the paint with brass bristle brush. I'll show that next week. And it then the stains at the back shows through. If you did did the spraying with primer, the primer color doesn't look good after you get the scraping off the paint or like that. It doesn't look right. So the stain brings that color out. Well, it looks like an untreated wood is what the effect you want.
You talked about the sanding to get the burn marks off of
Yes.
the wood. How much sanding are you talking about?
Oh, geez, maybe 2 or 3 swipe back and forth on a flat piece of sandpaper. I use anywhere from 180 to 240 in there. The ones that come out with big rocks on it, I think that there's too heavy.
Okay.
Yeah, 180 to 240 sandpaper, and about 2 or 3 swipes is all it takes.
You talked about the walls after you've painted both sides and weighted them down overnight, that they're not warping. What about bracing for the interior of the building?
Yeah, and the worn batten signings will require bracing on one side. I'll show you that as I go along later, because it will warp. They're painting the sides because they're primer paint, and when that dries, you're going to do the white paint on there, and just on one side, and it will wow just a little bit, and then they'll put bracing in there, and then it's not a problem. So that's one way you save a bit, the scrap of wood and for the bracing later on. Yep. Okay.
Anybody else have any more questions for Bob? Well, Bob, I appreciate it so very much. Thank you so much, and look forward to the next time in 1 week from today.
Very good.
Thank you. So now let's turn to Gaylord Gill and Randy Boswell. They're doing the build along with Arts Bar Mills 1 kit. Now this is totally different. It's called a kit, but it's really some bits and pieces, and you can make of it what you want. This is awfully close to scratch building, about as close as you can get without it being 100% scratch built model. So Gaylord, I appreciate you bringing this to everybody's attention. I certainly appreciate you and Randy spending the time and effort you have making this possible. I really appreciate you sending me the email from one of the modelers who's building along with you. His comments about what he is gaining from this process, to me, justifies a lot of the effort that everybody is putting forward in it. So far, I have not received any negative comments from any of the build-alongs, but I really appreciate a modeler taking the time and effort to send you the email that you shared with me. So Gaylord, Randy, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jim.
Good evening.
I will get my shared screen going. So Randy and I have decided we will share the presentations in turn. I'm going to present tonight. Randy will handle the presentation next week, and we'll go back and forth. We are doing the 1 kit, as Jim has said. And our first slide already has been shared with you by Jim as well. And that is if you mark May 29th, that is going to be our show and tell for the models that you're building with the 1 kit. And we have a single $25 gift certificate provided by Bar Mills, the manufacturer of the kit. And we will do a random draw, but you have to have a model on the table to be eligible. So we hope that you guys will all follow through with this. When we did a straw poll a few weeks ago, we saw about 10 hands that indicated people were planning to do the build of the 1 kit. And that was a mix of folks in HO, S, and O scale, which is really kind of neat. Just to remind you of the project timetable, we've done 2 intro sessions. We're now sitting at build number 1 of 4 sessions. Each of these will be just a week apart. So we had a lot of downtime between the intro and tonight, but we're going to go once a week now. So last time in March, we asked you to draw up plans that reflect what your project is going to look like. and to obtain the additional materials beyond what the kit provides to complete your project. So I'll ask at this time, are there any questions or issues with that assignment from last time? You can either speak up or put something in the chat. So the topics for tonight, we're going to talk about how to lay out the wall cuts, unlike the project that Bob just shared with you where the walls are pre-cut. We need to do our walls according to your plan. And then we are going to lay out the door and window placements that will reflect your project. And we have some considerations that we'll talk about for your foundation, the painting, and if you're going to do it, the lighting. So Randy's project that he's going to be building along is a pool hall. And here is a plan view. Let's make sure everybody understands terminology, architectural terms. When we talk about plan view, that is the classic bird's eye view. I guess today we would call it a drone's eye view, looking down on the structure. Randy's laid out a couple of challenges for himself. He's got an entryway here that has some walls that will not be at right angles. He has an L on the back of the building that is going to introduce an interior corner, a little different than the conventional exterior corners. And the L roof will have to intersect the main roof. So also another little challenge. And here's the other term that we'll be using, elevation view, looking full on to the wall. He's got some details here that we will talk about as we go through tonight. And I had shared with you before that I had already built a bar and grill from this one kit, and I've taken lots of intermediate photos during that build. So we'll use examples from both of these models as we go through to illustrate our points. Now, when you're working with your plan, obviously everyone's got a different plan because of the way this kit is designed. There's some pluses and minuses of the one kit we should talk about. Those etched guidelines that are on the back of the wall panels for the doors and the windows are a great help, but it might be that you can't use the doors and window guidelines as is. On my bar and grill, on the front second story, I was following a prototype photo that showed 3 equally spaced windows, but the spacing was wider than what the one kit would have built. So I effectively had to move 2 of my windows. One I could use exactly as planned, as the guidelines show. These 2 had to be moved. It turns out the third window, I got to use the guidelines on the side, but I cut away the part that normally would have been left intact. But that gave me the 3 evenly spaced windows. You might have to do something similar with your build. It also might be that you're not going to be able to use one of the factory edges, depending on how your windows lay out on the wall in your project. You might be making some cuts at both ends of the wall. So let's talk about wall cuts. We're going to recommend that you lay all of your marks for the cuts that you will be making, lay that out directly on the back of your wall panels and start right out with marking which wall this is. Here it says back wall, so that will help keep track as you're proceeding which wall you're talking about, and we'll show you what specifics we are recommending you put on that. Just some real basics, but because we are not working with laser cut parts, the old carpenter's adage of measuring twice, cut once is apropos here. Be careful with your measurements. In this digital age where you get awful used to using that undo button. But if you cut one of your walls a 16th inch too short, that's hard to undo. We really recommend getting all of your measurements into one format. Either work with a prototype ruler, so you're taking your measurements directly in prototype feet, or work with the actual model dimensions as you've converted prototype feet into scale inches. So stick with one. Doesn't matter which, whatever you're more comfortable with, but do everything with one ruler or the other. And we recommend marking everything in pencil before cutting. Ask me why that's a good idea. I think we've all had cases where we've made an inappropriate cut, but it's a lot easier to erase a pencil line, easier than to undo a cut.
Very important. Remember, everything is backwards when you're doing this layout.
Yep, good point, Randy. I'll mention that again coming up, but that's exactly right. Obviously, all cuts need to be straight. I hope everybody's using good straight edge, using sharp blades. It's especially important when you're making cuts with the grain. Here is a case where we might be cutting the wall to the appropriate height that we want. We recommend doing all of these basswood cuts with several passes. Don't try to dig in so deep that you're only going to do it in 2 cuts. Make several passes. Your initial cuts, keep that edge tight, slightly into the straight edge, get a groove started, and then complete your cuts. When we're cutting square cuts, now we're looking at cutting one of these walls to the appropriate length. Make sure you're using a good square. It's a good idea periodically to check from both sides of the piece. Here, the barrel of the square is at the top of the piece. Make a scribe mark, flip that over, lay it against the bottom of the piece. That helps you verify 2 things. One, that your tool is properly squared, and also that your piece you're working with has 2 parallel edges. We suggest you want to plan ahead for your corner joints. The length of the wall that we're measuring has corner trim at both ends. Now, the dimensions could be worked with just with the wall length itself, but the key is always make sure that your opposite walls are identical lengths and heights. Now, in a rectangular building, that's going to be more obvious and more easy to do. The front wall and that back wall need to be identical length and height. Randy's build is going to be a little tougher because of the L, but obviously the sum of this wall segment and this wall segment has to still equal the length of the back wall. Let's look at how these corner joints are going to work. We're going to talk a lot more about this next week, but unlike the kit that Bob shared earlier with all these nice interlocking pieces, our walls, once we cut them, are going to have these. This is another plan view looking down on it. Here we have our 2 clapboard walls, 2 adjacent walls. We're going to put some interior bracing in the inside corner and this visible corner trim on the outside corner. And we gotta get all of these lined up properly, but we're going to show you a neat technique next week on how to do that. That interior corner we mentioned on Randy's build, you may not have one of these, but this is how you would do it. Here's those same 2 clapboard pieces, but now we're looking at the outside surfaces, the exterior. We're still going to have that piece of corner trim in the corner, but only a tiny bit of it will be visible on the outside. And our interior bracing is going to be typically 2 pieces that are overlapped. The reason we're mentioning this in the terms of wall cuts, if you want to have a very precise measurement of your wall dimensions, here's a neat technique that we'll share with you. It takes 4 steps here. Let's say we're going to cut this wall to be 24 prototype feet long. And I'm going to use this edge as our reference point. So we lay the 24 feet out. If you hold that ruler down and now set your square right at the end of that, and then hold the square firmly, take the ruler away, we're going to lay 2 pieces of corner trim next to the square, tight to the square, and mark that line. Mark that on the wall. That represents the amount of the wall panel that's contributing to this 24 feet. And the 2 pieces of corner trim, one at each end of that same wall, make up the rest of the 24 feet. So where you've made that mark, that is where you'll make your cut through to create that section of wall. That's to get the most precise measurement. If your structure is not quite that, you don't care to hit exactly that length, you could kind of ignore your corner pieces and just cut your walls to the rough length. And as long as they are equivalent to the opposite wall, you're in good shape. There's some considerations for your gable ends. Okay, here again, we are now looking at, in Randy's case, the front and this back wall that are underneath the main roof. Typically, the pitch or the slope on both sides of that will be the same, although that's not always necessary, or the case, not always the case. You could have a more steeply pitched one side, but typically they're going to be equivalent. And again, you typically want this piece to be a mirror image of its corresponding wall on the back. And you could see in Randy's case, he's had to allow this extra segment on this side of this back wall to complete the L. And obviously that's not part of what the front wall has, but this part of the gable part that's underneath the main roof, those 2 need to be the same. And you can test that by putting the backs of the 2 walls together, and all these lines should line up, the bottom edge and the 2 pitched edges. There's one other consideration about gable ends, and this is maybe a little bit difficult to see, but here we're showing an elevation view of the gable, the eventual roof panel we're going to add to it, and the adjacent wall, which you're just seeing the edge of. The ideal cut, when we're talking about the height of the walls, the ideal cut is along these red lines. I'm cutting out my gabled wall here. You'll see that makes that edge slightly higher, slightly taller than the height of the wall that it's adjoining. And that's because of this slope, because of this pitch. If you don't allow that, and if you cut your gabled piece to be exactly the same height as the adjacent piece, you will wind up with a gap when you put this together. Now, that may not be a problem at all, because typically we're going to lay some trim pieces underneath here, or we might beef up the thickness of the roof piece to represent rafters. But kind of watch for that as you're laying out your gable ends adjacent to your adjacent wall. Let's talk about doors and windows. Here's the point Randy just made, that we are now going to transfer to the backs of our wall panels everything that's specified in our plan in terms of the window and door placements. So this is now, we're looking at it from the back, so everything's reversed. If your structure had a door to the left end as you're facing from the outside, it's now going to appear to be on the right end. We recommend first marking these out before you cut them. Mark with an X the part that you're going to be removing. I hope by now, as you've looked at the kit, you've thought about the height that you want for your windows. If you recall, the kit gives us what we would call a 10 light window, 10 small panes. And if you cut out all of the 5 knockouts, as I call them, that would fit that frame, the entire frame. For my bar and grill, I wanted 2 large panes in each window. So I needed to remove some of the mullions and muttons inside and create what would have been 4 small panes. I made 1 large pane. Here's the second large pane. And then I whacked off and did not use the last 2 panes worth. Whatever your plan calls for, you're going to have to decide how to do that, how many of the knockouts to cut out for the type of window that you want. But that'll be individual to your build. And also when you're cutting out your door openings, you might think about, are you going to have a threshold in that door space? You might need to allow a little bit extra for that. In other words, cut your door opening a slight bit higher for that.
Gaylord, can I ask you a question here?
Absolutely, yep.
Going back to that previous photo you had of the windows and the panes.
Yep.
Do you have any tips for cutting the panes out? I mean, it looks like to me that would be awfully delicate work.
It is. You're essentially having to follow the inside edge of this thing and just nip it away. I would recommend doing it fairly much freehand, but cutting it not. Don't try to get your cut exactly where you want it to end up, but cut it a little bit away from that frame, and then dress it with carefully dress it with a small file or piece of sanding stick.
Thank you.
Okay, when we are cutting on the guidelines, we still would recommend using a straight edge. Don't try to cut them freehand. Here's a little tip that Randy's used before, and I hadn't seen it, but it's a good idea. Because we're working with wood, because it's got grain and it tends to potentially splinter. He lays some tape down just outside each of the 4 corners, and it just kind of helps control the grain splitting as we're cutting these cuts. You want to always start in the corner, get your tip into the corner and pull away from the corner. And we recommend first doing those cuts that are against the grain, cross grain, because if you think of it, a knife blade, even as thin as this is, it's kind of like a farm plow going through the earth. It's pushing to both sides. So cut across the grain first, and then when you cut these with the grain, you're less likely to go past your corner point. We're going to suggest, again, several cuts. And if you keep cutting a little at a time until the knife blade just nicks through to the front surface. Then flip it over and complete your cuts from the front, and you'll be less likely again to chip away any of your wood from the presentation side. If you have any unusual foundation requirements, you should think about that as you're cutting out your walls. It's not likely your project would, but in my bar and grill project, you might recall, I had a side street that was going on a grade. And so I had to notch out the bottom of my wall for that. So just think about your foundation and see if there's anything that you might find unique about the cutting out of the walls. Bob already identified the importance of painting before you do your final assembly. There's nothing wrong with building the entire structure first and doing your painting, but you're making it awful hard on yourself. If you can if you have different colors that you're planning for your walls versus your corner trim versus your windows and doors, your foundation, of course, will be different color. It is much more simple to build these first as sub-assemblies and paint them before you do your final assembly. And if you're going to do lighting, kind of map out how you expect to light your structure, if you're going to do any individual rooms, where the lights actually will be. You can mark those right on your plan as well, or sorry, right on your wall panel as well. Map out where your wiring will go, where your power source will be for lighting. Obviously, the goal is that you have no bulbs or wires seen through the windows. And here's an example of a build that Randy did before, that all the wiring nicely gathered, held together with some dabs of glue, a single place where it is channeled down. This leaves this all open to be a freight door that is fully open and exposing the interior, but everything is tucked away to the side. I also point out a really neat feature that Randy proposes for all structure lighting. He's got a couple of surface mount LEDs here, but they're on a beam positioned in a way that they're shining upward, and he colors the underside of his roof panels a light color or white color, so that the light bounces off that white surface. It diffuses it really nicely. There are no real hot spots here. It's a great technique. This is just kind of a recap of these construction steps that we've identified today. We will add to these in future sessions, so you'll get kind of a master list of the order. Although I will say there's nothing wrong with doing these in different orders. Different people have different techniques that work for them. This is an order that we propose. So here are your assignments for next time. Cut your walls out to your plan. Cut out your door openings and your window openings. It's going to get real now. We're going to actually get started on doing our cuts. And once again, if you have any issues, need some help, here's a couple of email addresses for us, and we'll be happy to help you out. Randy, anything that I missed that you picked up on?
No, I think we're well covered. On the demonstration of how to precisely cut the walls and allowing for the corner pieces, if anybody is in need of a method to center those door and window cutouts, the system that was shown, the 4 pictures on one page, essentially you can use that same thing to center them. Okay, great. Thank you, Gaylord. essentially all we're going to do is work from the center out, or right now you see the illustration is working from one end to the other of the wall panel. And that's fine for a straight wall. But if you have a critical need, like, okay, let's do an example here. You take the 3 window openings or cutouts that are under the ruler at the moment. So let's assume we want to keep those 3, but we want them to be centered in your end wall. So let's assume the same 20-foot wall. We're going to first find the center of those 3, which is easy enough to do in this case. Then slide your scale to the 10-foot mark instead of 20 foot, and then basically repeat the whole system. The only difference is now put 1 piece of trim before you make your mark, because then we're going to flip the wall around left to right and do the whole thing again. In other words, again, measure from the center 10 feet out, take 1 piece of trim off, and now you'll have that all nicely centered. So it's the same thing, just work from the center out instead of from the right to the left.
Good.
Oh, one quick note too on the window cutouts. This may be endemic just to the S-scale kit. I don't know, but be aware that you may have to adjust the windows, the openings of the windows or for the windows to fit the final size of your sashes. You know, mine do not exactly fit. So just something to keep an eye on. It's very easy to adjust, obviously, but something to check for.
It's interesting because mine worked perfectly. When I did my build, they worked perfectly.
So yeah, Gaylord had a very early version of this kit, and there were a number of differences to the one that I have. There's none of that may be true in case of the HO or the O scale ones either. We do not know. So,
any other questions?
I
Jim,
have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering what is the thickness of your walls?
the ones in the S scale kit are 1/16 of an inch thick.
1/16?
Yes.
Do you have a different experience with your kit?
No, not whatsoever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guys, it's Court Cooning. One little suggestion when you do the walls or the cutout for the windows, if you take a little drill 76 or so and drill into the 4 corners, it'll stop that splitting for you.
Good.
Yeah, obviously basswood has very little strength parallel to the grain.
Yeah, and it's a shame because it's having designed and cut out kits, and Greg will probably say the same thing. It's very hard to do an orientation where you're not getting that because there's only so many ways you can orientate parts on a sheet.
Sure. And obviously, if you're doing scribe siding or something, you're going to have to go with the grain anyway. So you're quite right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's particularly a problem. Earlier in the thing, we showed a very short wall with 2 window cutouts. Well, the outside edge of that is less than 1/4 of an inch from the end of the wall. So you do want to be careful. So.
Yeah.
But glue works
it's
too.
Amazing how many times that little, and in smaller scales, it becomes a lot smaller, that space between a door and the end of the wall.
Oh yeah, I don't even want to imagine what that'd be in N scale.
It's called, we'll glue it back together.
Yeah, totally agreed. So.
I hate rework, but everything is fixable. If you mess something up, it can be fixed.
Well, you guys are worried about HO scale. They do have T scale. What is that, 1/450 or something?
Z scales, the really small one I'm aware of.
Do those sets come with a magnifying glass?
He is like half the size of Z scale.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the very early television sets when they used to sell a Fresnel lens that you would put in front of it that hopefully made the set look bigger.
Well, Gaylord, Randy, thank you so much tonight. Really do appreciate it. And
Sure.
as you say, if anybody has any questions after they've started cutting out their walls or windows and doors, you've given them your email address. Please contact them and you'll get some help in a return email. So guys, thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate it.
Sure.
Well, now normally we would go to a featured modeler, but we don't have one of those tonight because I wasn't sure how long this was going to run with both Gaylord and Bob doing their build-alongs. Plus, I wanted to make some comments and get your opinions and whether I'm going down the right track here or not. We've got Clark has done a build-along. Greg Cassidy has done a build-along. Bob and Gaylord and Randy have started build-alongs tonight. So you've had an idea of what we're trying to do and how we've been trying to present the build-alongs. Well, we've got one more after Bob and Randy and Gaylord are finished with theirs. It's going to be done by Rick and Maureen Hunter. And then we're going to be through for the summer. Well, this fall, we've already lined up some more my builds. And what I want to do is I want to talk about what the plans are. And I want to get your feedback of whether we need to modify, change. What do we need to do to make this better for you, more interesting for you, more educational for you, more desirable for you to talk to your friends about and get them maybe interested in watching. So the first one I want to talk about is the Motrack models build along of one kit in 4 scales by 4 individual modelers. Ed, if you could spotlight me.
I think he's gone for a minute.
Okay. The modelers are Clark Cooning in N scale, Greg Cassidy in HO, Bob Farquhar in S scale, and Phil Edholm in O scale. Now, this was really Phil's idea. Phil came up with the idea and said, you know, for modelers who aren't really sure what scale they want to go to or be in, maybe a build along of one kit in all 4 scales, 4 major scales, would be really interesting to a lot of people because they could see the difference that's involved in building models in the 4 different scales. So Greg Cassidy suggested Motrack models. And earlier, I had called and talked to Jeff Adam, and he couldn't have been more interested. He couldn't have been more helpful. He couldn't have been more forthcoming. Is he going to give a good price on the kits? You better believe it. A super good price. Is it going to be a kit that you're going to be proud to build? You better believe it. What the kit is, I'm not going to tell you right now. What Jeff has offered us is the possibility of he may offer a special kit that hasn't been on the market before. Just for this build along. He's going to be sending me some different plans that he has in mind of kits that he is thinking about producing, but has not yet made that decision. We also talked about one of his existing kits and changes that we might propose him to consider if we selected that kit. And he was most forthcoming and had no problem with that at all. So here's a manufacturer that, as far as I'm concerned, couldn't have been more cooperative, couldn't have been more forthcoming. And of a lot of people that I have talked to in this hobby, there was no question in my mind that for something like this, as groundbreaking as I think that this could be, Jeff at Motrack Models was 1000% behind us, and he's going to do everything that he can to make this a successful effort for you. So you know what the model is, where the model is going to come from. You know the builders. You know how talented the builders are. So when are we going to start this? Well, I'm thinking about the 28th of August. 28th of August would be a start date where we would have Jeff, the manufacturer, all 4 of the modelers, and we do a roundtable. Might take the whole show for it. Not do anything else that night except for this. And have Jeff talk to us about his company, about his models, about his philosophy of building, about the specific model that we're going to use in the program, and have each one of the modelers at the same time discuss what it's going to be like to build the model in their scale, in the scale they're going to be building it in for you, and try to give you an idea of the differences that you're going to encounter by building in different scales. Maybe the difference in material, maybe the difference in glues, maybe the difference in painting, maybe the difference in tools, maybe the difference in techniques. And have them talk about it. And then do another one and start the build on September the 4th. I know, bad date. September 11th, September 18th, September 25th, October 2nd. If they need more time, so be it. And then schedule after that a special My Build for the people who have built along with them. And try to get as many people as possible to show the models that they built in the My Build, talk about what they experienced in the scale that they built it in, and try to share with us the knowledge that they may have gained from this project. So that's the big one as far as I'm concerned, that I'm really concerned about. I want to know if you have any comments or suggestions about it. Please let me know. It's not too late for us to change and do something different. What I have in mind as far as the procedure to run the individual sections is to have one of the 4 modelers be the moderator. And actually, for that segment, do the My Build or do the building for the model. And then have a roundtable with all 4 of the modelers and have the other 3 talk about the differences that they would have to encounter if they were building the same thing that they just saw him build in their scale. Is that the best way to do it? I don't know. How else would you propose to do it? I'm open to suggestions. That's what I'm thinking right now. It can be totally different. You know, I want to make this interesting. I want to make it educational. I want to make it a benefit to you. I want it to be worth the time of the modelers and the manufacturer who are going to be doing this work. And the only way that I can try to make sure that happens is to ask for your input. So if you have any ideas, please let me know, because it's certainly something that we can talk about, discuss, and try to get as right for you as we possibly can. Then we've also got 3 other My Builds for this fall lined up. We've got Bill Davis building a rail scale model, one of Steel Millie's kits. And I'm thinking of doing that one starting October the 9th. Then we have Martin Breckbill, MMR, building a Leadville design. And I'm thinking of starting that one September the 22nd. And then we've got another one that Banter has offered us. And I'm looking for an HO or an O scale modeler to do that. And that I'm thinking of starting the October 27th. those are not firm dates. Those are not dates written in stone, but that's how I'm thinking of trying to spread it apart, where throughout the fall, we'll in effect have a My Bill pretty much on a Wednesday and Saturday basis for the whole season. And that's what I'm hoping is going to happen. I'm hoping that these My Bills can be something that is central for our shows, because it accomplishes what I started the shows out to be for in the first place. And that was to encourage modelers to build more models and try to get modelers with real talent to help modelers who may need some help in building models. Mentoring. Those are the purposes. That's what this is all about in my mind. So with that said, that's what I need help with. How to structure, how to present the build-alongs in the best possible way to make them the most beneficial to you in your modeling. So if you have any comments, please let me know, either right now or by email later or whatever. And Ed, you can put my email in the chat so that everybody can have it. But if you'd like to talk about this right now, please, let's do it.
Hey, Jim, this is Phil. Apologize for being late. We started at 1 o'clock doing dry runs for the PCR convention next weekend, which is the precursor to the NMRA in the summer. And it's very interesting to try to have a whole bunch of people figure out how to do a great event. So one suggestion, if you and I can get together, I'd like to try to make the timing more obvious, right? So one of the things I think is the problem is, it's like, if I'm doing this My Build, what are the days that that's going to happen? And put that in a...
Hold it. I got it right here for you. Let me just read them to you right now.
No, I want them in a graphic, not read them.
Well, I can give them to you, Phil, and you can do whatever you want to with them, if that's okay. So it's going to start on 8/28, and that's going to be a general session with the manufacturers and all 4 builders. That's in effect starting the My Build.
Right.
Then the next one will be on the 4th of September, the 11th of September, the 18th, the 25th, October the 2nd, and if you need another date, it would be October the 9th.
So what I want to do is get those dates so what I want to do is put together a single chart.
Hold on. Hold on. I'm going to give you the other dates right now, Phil. The other 3 models, the one that Martin Breck built will start on the September 22nd. And then it'll run from those, just whatever week it is, September 22nd, September 29th, and so forth, until Martin is finished with it. I can't give you how long it's going to take Martin to do it, but I can tell you that that's what my thought is right now. Then Bill Davis is going to start his with the Leadville model on November the 2nd, November the 9th, November the 16th, November 23rd, blah, blah, blah. Can't tell you past that because I don't know how long it's going to take Martin to build it.
Yeah, Jim, I think part of what Phil's getting at is that it would help all of us to have a master calendar that we could keep track of all of these topics. And some kind of graphic format on the website would be really super.
So Jim, I'll call you. I'll get all the build dates, including the ones you've got scheduled between now and then, the ones that are going on now, and I'll put them in something. I'll call you and do it.
That would be great if you can do that, because I certainly can't do it. I don't have the time to do it, Phil, but it needs to be done. And as everybody on the show knows, I've been asking for help for some time. No one has volunteered to help. So the ideas that everybody has are great, but we need help to get them put together because TC is sick. He hasn't been able to do what he's been supposedly helping with. Ed's been by himself. And right now, that's basically with Darren doing the recording for the shows. That's the people that are trying to put all of this stuff together. And I'll tell you, it's great that we have ideas, but we need help putting these together. So Phil, if you can do the calendar for me, that would be wonderful. I appreciate it. And I can give you the detailed dates. I've got the dates, but I can't tell you how long they're actually going to run until the modelers tell me how much time they need.
If I may, please, Jim, there is a calendar on the website already, Gil, but these My Builds are not on it.
No.
It would be really helpful, Phil. I could get you the password to that calendar system back end, and you could put all this up. I think everybody would benefit.
Good.
Yeah, I'm looking at a one page JPEG that's got the next 6 months and has everything on it. And you can and Jim can put it up and share it during these meetings. And then you can put it directly on the website. You can mail it to people and it has the schedule. And it's just a very simple thing that's got dates and lines and has the builds and shows which dates, which builds are going to be on. So you kind of follow them.
Right.
I'll get the dates from Jim.
There's some stuff on the website. It's not that nicely organized.
Yep. No, I understand. Let me just go to Jim and
let's talk a little bit later instead of taking
Okay.
up time right now.
Yep, cool.
And maybe we can get some stuff.
And
put up that's more helpful.
TC, Phil, TC knows this. I've been trying to get this done. We need somebody who will post to the website. No question about it. There's a lot of information that we can put on the website. We don't have somebody who can post to the website. That's the problem. And TC has not been able to do it.
I understand.
I mean, if you look at the postings of the shows on YouTube, TC has posted no telling how many all at one time because he just hasn't been able to post any of them on YouTube. So Darren has recorded them. Darren has broken them up into individual segments, and they're all sitting there because nobody has the capability of posting on the YouTube except TC, and he's been sick. And we haven't been able to find somebody else to help us. So I'm not crying about it. I'm just telling you, I really appreciate the help. And if you can do that for us, that would be...
I'll pull some, that's something I can pull together for you. I'm being quiet because I literally, I've spent 35 hours in the last 5 days working on model railroad stuff. By the way, for anybody who's interested, I put the registration link in the chat for the PCR convention. That'll be next Saturday. Unfortunately, it'll run a little bit into Jim's time because it doesn't end till 9:30 Pacific. But if you're interested, check it out. It's free. And there is very much the most interesting layout tour is a clinic by a guy who decided to model the Yosemite Valley. And he looked at all the photographs and realized none of the photographs were in color. Therefore, he could never prototypically do the railroad in color. So he's modeling in black and white. So it's kind of an interesting thing to see a whole railroad all modeled in black and white. So a little zinger there.
It's actually the Hetch Hetchy Railroad.
Hetch Hetchy, that's right. It's at the Hetch Hetchy Railroad. Absolutely right. I blew it there. But yeah, if you haven't signed up, it's worth signing up for probably and checking out. Plus, we're trying to do it in a very different way than like a Zoom meeting. So when you go to clinics, it's actually much more like a clinic. It's going to be in a special tool, and there's going to be an audience, and there are clinicians, and you can ask questions, and it's very much a structured environment, and trying to do that for the summer as well. So it's great to have everybody come experience it and comment on how bad we do.
Hey Phil, did you attend the World's Greatest Hobby show today?
I did not, because I literally have been on Zoom calls. I started this morning at 8 o'clock, and I literally have been on Zoom until right now in other things.
Okay,
Phil, you're still on Zoom.
how did that show go?
I thought it was well done the way they did it with the rooms, with having live. The only thing you couldn't do is converse. So you had to type your questions in, but they were actively answering questions. The manufacturers were showing their stuff. They had other video recordings. They had different rooms. They had layout tours. So it was really like an actual World's Greatest Hobby show without being able to step in there. So there was that one difference, but it's definitely different than what NMRAX has done. And it's got a good basis. I know that you're going to be doing the PCR show beforehand. I know that they're going to be posting it. I don't know if they have a YouTube website, but they said something about having them available next month, maybe to review. But I thought it was a pretty decent setup.
That's good. Yeah. So what we'll have on Saturday, a week from Saturday, is there'll be two major rooms. One will be the clinic rooms, and there'll actually be a morning, afternoon, and evening clinic room. So the idea is you go in the clinic room, and the way the clinics are, it's really just like a clinic you go to where the audience sits in chairs and the clinicians at a table at the front. The only difference in this clinic is that there's a glass wall, so you can't throw things at the clinicians. So essentially, the way to think about this is Zoom has a tool called a webinar tool. And the way it works is people have a meeting just like we're having, and there are a whole bunch of people that can watch the meeting. And so if you control the way the meeting's structured and you only have the right people on the screen, kind of what Ed tries to do here, you can do that really well. But if you're in the audience, you just see it. You can ask questions. There's a chat where you can chat to everybody. There's a question tool so you can ask specific questions. But there's also an interesting characteristic that if you after the clinic, after you raise your hand, the person who's controlling it can click on you and turn your audio on so you can ask a question of the clinician. And so you can actually have in-person questions. The other thing that's really cool is almost all of the clinicians pre-recorded their clinics. And kind of the first reaction everybody says is, why would you want to do that? You do it for three reasons. One, you can guarantee quality. Two, you can edit it for time, et cetera. But the third reason that's really interesting is when a clinician's you actually are playing the clinic, that's the clinician doing the clinic. While it's playing, they're going to be sitting there in the Q&A asking your questions. So if you're watching the clinic and you happen to see a picture that's got that 1935 fire engine in you've been looking for the last 17 years in your scale, you can ask the clinician, hey, where'd you get that fire engine? And they can reply to you. And then at the end of the clinic, what will happen is there'll be live questions. And then what we've done is we've got another Zoom meeting that's going to be like this one, but it's called the main hall. And what we're going to have is a whole bunch of breakout rooms. And so the idea is when the clinic gets done, the clinician will go over to the breakout called The Clinic Goes On, and it'll be there just like if they went in the hall and can answer your questions. And we'll have other breakouts. There's going to be a SIG breakout where the OPSIG and the LD SIG will be having sessions where we're going to have a cool tool breakout and have it. And during the lunch and dinner, we're going to have a 3D birds of a feather session. So the idea is there's a lot of kind of interesting things that'll happen. And that's doing exactly the same thing they did, which is how do you replicate an NMRA event, whether it's a regional clinic or a national clinic, virtually? Because I think there's going to be a really interesting question asked of all of us after this is over, which is why do we just have physical events? So in other words, if you think about the NMRA, how many of you have gone to the NMRA convention? How many have been to an NMRA convention? So about a third to half of the people. How many of you went to an NMRA convention on the other side of the country? 2. So what it says is the majority of people go to conventions that are close to them, because the reality is going to a convention costs you $2,000 to $2,500. I went to the Colorado one. By the time I got done, I added up, it was like $2,300 to go to the convention. I mean, the interesting question is, what if you could go to the conventions that were close to, and the other years you could participate, maybe not in the same way, but virtually? And I think that's a question we really need to ask, because virtual allows us to include a lot of people who, for lots of reasons, can't necessarily travel. So yeah, it'd be great. And by the way, if anyone wants to be a volunteer and learn how to use this stuff, volunteer for the NMRA convention in the summer. There's going to be an awful lot of training that we're putting together about, how to produce meetings, how to make, so when you're doing Ed's job, we're going to actually teach everybody how to do Ed's job in a very professional way. So we're managing transitions and the output looks really good. So, because that's really what we need to learn to do, is to make ourselves really good at this. So back to you, Jim. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you so much. So does anybody else have any comments about the build alongs?
Yeah, Jim, this is Greg. when we were first talking about this, I was thinking about, well, when we get to October, no, August, September, October, and we're presenting these, I was kind of wondering, how are we going to do this? And I think when you mentioned that each night, one of the modelers would be kind of the ringmaster and would be presenting, and then afterwards, the rest of us could talk about how that differed from what we were doing. That made perfect sense. That, and like you said, you know, there may be a better way to do it, but right now that kind of said to me a way of getting around each of us just presenting the same thing kind of over and over again, except the pictures get smaller and smaller.
That's the issue that I was trying to figure out, Greg, and I thought that's going to get boring awfully fast.
Yep.
But particularly if I'm only in one scale and I'm not interested really in the other three. But if we break it up and have a different person, then whoever's doing it that night is going to be in a different scale. So you're going to have one night an N scaler doing the presentations basically, and next time it's could be an O scaler. So that to me breaks it up, but it still it brings what Phil I think was trying to do to the front of everything. It shows the difference in the scale and the different involvement of what it takes to build in the different scales.
Yeah, you know, I think what would be good is when the four of us get together, we'll agree on kind of the 4 or 5 stages we want to go through, and then we agree on who should be prime on each one of those stages. And then basically my thought was you make it a discussion afterwards, right? So you have one demonstration of one thing, and then after that we stop and we go back to a discussion with the 4 modelers talking about, okay, well, this is what's different in that, maybe showing some differences. So it becomes kind of a focus and dialogue. And then basically each one of us will have probably one focus and then we'll be in the dialogue. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody as how to handle it.
It does. And Phil, I was thinking in our planning for this, we might actually want to all get together person to person for planning. And since you're in California, I suggest we all meet at your place. And you know, this will be on the new tracks budget, I'm sure. So
you know, here's the problem. So I'm the superintendent of the Coast Division of the PCR, and which is basically the Bay Area in California, but it also includes Hawaii. And that was the only reason I accepted when they came and said they wanted me to run for it. I assumed we would have a meeting in Hawaii, and as a superintendent, my trip would be paid. And nobody's yet agreed to pay for my trip. So, you know, everybody's just been saying that it's put off for COVID, but nobody's agreed. So anybody's more than welcome to come out this way. It's a fairly nice area, other than being dry now and worrying about fire. So
I have a couple of friends. One of them's a multi-scale modeler. We could arrange a virtual visit at his hotel. He owns a hotel.
So actually, Jim, I had one thing. Are we kind of at the point where we want to share? Can we share something?
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Is it about the build along?
No, it's not about build alongs. I'm sorry.
Okay, I want to try to get through the build along if I possibly can tonight. Let me ask you this. Do you like the idea of building in more than one scale at a time? Or had you rather have the one person just build the model in one scale, whatever that is? Would you like the scale built in to be a large scale, or does it make any difference what the scale is? What do you think?
Well, I know I've built kits in 3 different scales, and I've learned something about all 3 of the scales. What I've mostly learned is the scale that I'm building in the most is what I like the most, but the other 2 scales offered different insights into how you can do stuff that has been useful.
For the people that won't try it, another scale, if they're seeing the same thing they work on in their scale, it'll probably give them a hint that they can do it in another scale too.
So do you have a preference on what scale we should concentrate on? Should all of this be in HO or S or O? Or should we try to break it up? That's what I've been trying to do in the past is get people building in different scales.
Definitely multiple scales.
Agree.
What about the manufacturer? How do we select the manufacturers? What manufacturers do you want to see doing this?
I wouldn't go by manufacturer. I'd go by materials or style of build over manufacturer.
And Jim, I'll tell you one thing I've been kind of thinking about. I love building structures, and I've got a layout in the basement. I built a whole railroad, but right now I like building structures. But I wonder if a lot of your audience feels that since all of our build-alongs have been structured, are we leaving behind people who might be building either locomotives or other railroad cars?
Oh, that's why Martin is going to build the Leadville Designs car, because I agree with you.
Okay, I didn't know it was a car. I just heard it was from Leadville.
No, it's a car.
Great.
It's a maintenance away car. And that's why I asked, oh geez, the guy that makes the kits, the cars. He's been on our show. I can't bring his name to light. Rick
Steele?
Yes, that's why that's why I asked him to build one of his kits. And and then he got busy and so forth, and he started doing some stuff with Dylan on wheels and trucks, and he asked me to put him off for a while, and that's why I haven't gone back to him yet. But I would love to do a locomotive. I would love to do a car. The problem with doing a locomotive is the cost, and picking a locomotive that people would spend money to build along with. I don't know how to do that, and I don't know how to control the cost of it. I don't know whether to try to, and when you start talking about locomotives, I don't know whether you're talking about a 3D printed kit or, like the two mics did with the little critter. That could be a possibility, but at the same time, it's a locomotive is a significant cost, and I'm not sure people would want to do that, Greg. That's the only reason.
Yeah, I think freight cars would be a more reasonable expectation of people being interested in.
So if people want cars, I have no problem in the world doing that. That's great. But which manufacturer? Which manufacturer would people want to build a car from?
Sounds like a poll to put on the website or something.
Well, yeah, but I'm not sure about polls. What I have more in mind is that if a person wants to build a car from a manufacturer, I don't mind calling the manufacturer and trying to negotiate a deal with the manufacturer. And frankly, if you talk to the manufacturer straight up and tell them what the issue is and what the problems are, what you're trying to accomplish, if they'll deal with you if it's the right manufacturer, no question in my mind. I mean, it's just that simple. It's not rocket science. You just call up and tell them what the issue is, what you need, and you negotiate it. It's no big deal. But it's going to take a modeler who wants to build that kit, because finding the manufacturer, trying to cut the deal with him, having him say, yeah, I'll do this, I'll do that. Yes, okay, fine. Gee whiz, what else? Yeah, that's fine. But who's going to build it? And if you don't have somebody that really wants to build what that manufacturer produces, it's just not, I don't think it's going to come out right. So I've got to find in my opinion, I got to find the modeler who wants to build a kit from a manufacturer, the same, Greg, as when we started this, and I asked you if you'd be the modeler, and if so, what manufacturer did you want to use? And I'll do cars, I'll do locomotives, I'll do anything. But I got to have a modeler who's committed to it and wants to deal with a specific manufacturer. And it comes back to, we need help. If there are modelers out there that want to do a build along, what do they want to do? What manufacturer do they want to use? And we'll get it done.
Be honest, I think you're herding cats, Jim. I don't think you can pick and choose. Just, you know, it's everybody has their own view of what they want to do.
Exactly.
So I don't think you can satisfy everybody. I think you try and pick one that has a multiple scales and then try your best.
And that's, I agree. But again, Clark, it comes to people like you who I can come to and say, Clark, will you build the kit? Yes. Well, what kit do you want to build? And I got to find something that you're interested in building, Clark.
Well, I mean, when we, and not to talk about it, but mowing with the Masters, I mean, I never really built kits that I would build, mostly because I built them already, but I would build kits that I thought 38 guys or 38 people would come and take the course. So, you know, that's how we pick kits now. And we also picked kits that were a little bit more than a simple kit because we wanted to teach them something. We just went in 2 minutes and they're done. Now, you know, there's certainly no reason why we can't do some scratch building. I've got about 4 different clinics that I could do on scratch building right away.
I don't have a problem with doing one on scratch building. I mean, we're doing the one kit. That's as close to scratch building as you can get. I don't have a problem with scratch building and not have a manufacturer. Or I don't mind doing a scratch building and have Northwest be the manufacturer.
Looks like Clark had to go on a phone call.
I mean, I'm open to anything as long as the modeler is there to select what he wants to present.
One idea that doesn't require a kit is if someone would be willing to do a series on scenery techniques. That's pretty scale independent. We all do scenery.
And that's why I asked Dave Silvernail to do the segments on scenery that he's doing. And he's getting ready in May to do one a week on rock castings and weathering of rocks. Well, that's scale independent, you know, and what products he uses is up to him, you know, and if we need a manufacturer to get involved with him in doing that, I have no problem. Just tell me who the manufacturer is. I'll call them up and see what a deal we can cut.
Sorry, guys. It was my brother calling. I think we can do that. And, you know, scratch building, a couple of the projects are very, very simple.
Well, we don't need it too simple because, you know, let's face it.
But
we've had Martin talk about scratch building for probably 4 or 5 sessions now. And if you look at the models that he's building, they're not super, super detailed models, really, but they're models that anybody can use on their model railroad.
And so would these. So,
you know, and trying to teach scratch building, I think that would be great. No question about it. I'm all for it.
Well, it ain't going to happen until after the fishing season sometime.
I understand. I'm not looking for anything. I'm not looking for anything right now, Clark, but that's great. But again, if there's anybody out there that has an idea, I don't care if it's scenery, cars, I don't care what it is, scratch building, I'm open to anything. The purpose is more people building models and mentoring. Help them get the skills and techniques necessary to improve their modeling. That's all I care about.
So Jim, one of the things is most of the structure models that we've done so far are predominantly wood. And when you talk about
except for Clark's,
wood, and if you talk about cars or rolling stock, you have 2 very distinct model types, right? One is plastic and the other is wood. And I think that's kind of an interesting question. And might think about, you know, is it good to try to have some styrene/plastic modeling either in cars, you know, as a different material, right? Because
absolutely. I agree 100%. I totally agree. Give me a modeler who will build it and a manufacturer who produces it.
We do a simple styrene little one that's like 2 hours. It's a great clinic. People could do it, but it teaches you about styrene. Then we go on to another one, and actually we do this in wood and styrene, so you can see the difference in building the two models. It's exactly the same structure, but it's two different models. Now, there's other things that we can do. There's loads. There's loads are another fun thing that a lot of people can use on their layouts. And they're non-scale specific. So I think there's ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. It's fantastic.
And I'm quite willing to do some of them when I have the time, as in the fall.
Well, I understand, but I can't ask you to do them all, Clark.
No, and I don't want to do them all because you need to have different views.
Well, and I need to get more people involved, and the more modelers that are involved, their friends will come to see if they make a mistake. And that's good too. That's fine because it's more people seeing what's happening. So, but I need to spread it out and get more people, more ideas. But it comes down to, if you want to do one, let me know what you want to do, who the manufacturer is.
Only problem is sometimes you don't keep to the timeline.
No, everybody yell really loud at Jamie.
No, I don't. All right.
Because you look like you were asleep, Jamie.
All right.
So hard time.
So that's all I got tonight, guys. For next time, let me tell you about the next show coming up, and then I'll go out.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
On that, I think it's the Blair line that's making the A1 kit. We come up with a drawing for a structure.
Yes, sir. That's Bar Mills is making it.
Bar Mills, okay. Do we send that by email to drawing? Do we send the drawings to Bar Mills, or do we have to mail it to them?
No. You buy the kit from Bar Mills. It's called Bar Mills 1 kit, 1-IT.
And then you make one.
Edward.
Yes.
Highlight me, spotlight me, if you can.
Okay. Hold on 1 second.
So these are 3 kits. Hang on, let me turn off my virtual background so you guys can see. I've got them basically pretty well set for the next stage. So this is O, but these are 3 kits worth of sides. And if you look on these, what you'll see is, I haven't started cutting yet, but each one, what I've done is you can see the lines there, they're the guidelines that are cut. So those guidelines are kind of with the laser cutter, not through the wood, but kind of as guidelines. And what you see here is, all the places. So for example, this big piece down here, that's where this 3D printed piece is going to go, is right there. So this is a door, this is a window. And so basically, this is actually the wall that goes on top of that, because I put the brake line in behind. But so that's what you get, is you get a bunch of these sheets. I think there were 4 of these in a kit. And then the rest of the kit is just these pieces over here. So like these are the windows there, and then these are the doors that it comes with. And the other piece, there's another window sheet and another door sheet. And so those are kind of the pieces you get. And what you do is you do your design and you kind of just move it over and transfer it onto this. And what's really cool is you kind of use these lines to establish where you're going to put stuff. And so it makes it pretty easy. The lines don't exactly line up because this is very much tied to a very specific building drawing, but that's kind of what it looks like. So you don't ever send any plans to anyone. You just use your plans to transfer to these to cut it.
That's why we say it's very similar to scratch building.
I got to tell you, the reality is the kit is really nice for those lines. Other than that, it's scratch building. I mean, but by the way, just so you can see for the rest of it, I think I showed you guys, this is the roof print for the roof framing. So this is going to be the roofing with basically just siding on the top of it, roofing on it. And then that'll be on the building. That'll be the roof.
Now that's the kit you're building with it though, right?
That's the building I'm building with it, which is an O scale model of, if you go online, you can find it. It's called the Commercial Hotel in Boulder Creek, California. So what I do is I pick and by the way, I picked the building. If you look at the picture, when I show this, I talk about it. The reason I picked that building is that it has these really nice spacings down the side where the windows are. They're really spaced, and it turns out it matches very well to the layout on the kit. So actually, when I went looking for a building, I actually kind of picked the building based on knowing that there's this 32-inch spacing on the kit, or on the wood you get. I don't like calling it a kit. I think what they ought to call it is, modules or pieces, because you're really never building a kit.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I really hope that you'll consider building along with Gaylord and Randy. And if you have questions about the kit, please email them, because I know Gaylord is getting emails, and I assume Randy is too. So please, if you have any questions at all about the one kit or their project, please email them and go from there. All right, so next time is Wednesday on the 21st. Paul Wusong is going to be our featured modeler, who is going to talk about this NMRA LCC project again. He's going to take, Paul is a professor at the University of Chicago, and he's really knowledgeable in the stuff, but he hasn't been involved in it from the NMRA standpoint like John was in his presentation last time. So I think you're going to really enjoy what Paul's presentation is going to be about, this LCC stuff. Then we're going to have the My Build with the Build Along for the people who have built Clark's Build Along project. Martin Breckfast, MMR, is going to do a scratch building time. And then we've got quick tips from Paul Thompson. And that'll be our show that's coming up on the 21st. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I hope you learned something.